Okay, good afternoon. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for coming to DrupalCorn. This is, you seeing the same thing here? Okay. All right, great. This is what are panels and why you should be using them. My name is Adam Delaney. Let me see if I can get this. Is that switching? Okay. My name is Adam Delaney. I live here in Iowa City. I'm a designer and a Drupal developer for the University of Iowa in ITS. I have 2 years experience with Drupal, and I came from like a print background, so more of a graphic design background. And when I first started with Drupal, it was kind of a switch for me. I started with more static HTML design, and I kind of had control over my page. And I remember sitting in my first Drupal kind of crash course class and couldn't figure out how to get these blocks on the page, and it was kind of confusing. It was a little different for me, but finally I got kind of the hang of blocks and placing blocks into regions. And as I kind of continued on with my Drupal development, and as you kind of start building larger scale sites, you have lots of blocks. This probably looks familiar for Drupal site builders, where you have modules that build blocks or you build custom blocks, and your block interface starts kind of looking like this. You have just loads and loads of blocks in different regions. They're kind of difficult to organize, and it kind of gets a little bit overwhelming. This is a block configuration page, and this is an actual website that we built a while back ago, and we actually opened up the blocks interface to our kind of our web liaison, and they were allowed to kind of add blocks and then tell Drupal where those blocks actually show up. This is a sample screenshot that I took. You can see that they've checked only list this block on these pages, and this actually goes down further. So they've just listed a ton of paths. Their URL aliases weren't set up very well, so they kind of just had to one-off each instance where this block needed to show up. But it's kind of a management nightmare. You have this one block, it's showing up all over the place. It's kind of hard to get organized and figured out where exactly this block is showing up. The other thing about blocks is if you build a block view, they're not very aware. So you can tell your block view to go get a node ID from the URL, or give it like a fixed argument. And then when the block is rendered, it kind of goes and grabs that argument and then decides whether it needs to show up on the page or actually filter those results. But for the most part, they're not very smart. They just kind of sit on the page and they get some information maybe from the URL and decide whether they need to render or not. So they're not very aware. This is a common thing that I would get. You'd have a client who loves the website, but they wanted that block placement changed on maybe one page. And kind of with the blocks interface, you get this stack of blocks, and you get that one instance of the block, and you kind of can place it. You can order and drag and drop it, but it's kind of fixed there. So if you needed to rearrange that block, you'd have to figure out a new solution to do that. It's not really available straight out of Drupal that way, to work that way. So blocks aren't really flexible using the Drupal block system. You can't really change the order of them for a one-off page. They're just kind of inflexible that way. So there's got to be a better way to kind of deal with this. And that's where our ITS group has adopted a panels implementation. Panels is a suite of modules, really, but panels is one set of modules. It's developed by Earl Miles, and this is straight from the project page. Panels module allows a site administrator to create customized layouts for multiple uses. At its core, it is a drag-and-drop content manager that allows you to visually design a layout and place content within that layout. Integration with other systems allow you to create nodes that use this, landing pages that use this, and even override system pages such as taxonomy and the node page, so you can customize the layout for your site with very fine-grained permissions. Like I said, the panel solution that we use is kind of an integrated suite of tools. So you'll need several modules to implement kind of the demo site that I'm going to show you. The modules that I used in my demo site was CTools, and then there's some sub-modules underneath that. So I enabled CTools, Views Content, and Page Manager. Then in the Panels project, I turned on Panels and Panels IPE. I downloaded a project and turned on a project called PanelEyes, and the last modules is Views and Views UI. And I think the best way to kind of demonstrate the power of panels and why you should probably be using them is to just take a look at a demo site and kind of let's deconstruct panels and see why they're useful and why you should maybe consider using them in your next development project. So this is just a Drupal site that I spun up yesterday. It's a Drupal 7 site, again, enabling those modules from that module list that I just went over. And I turned on all those modules. The first thing I want to show you is the panels interface. So if you go to Structure, you'll get this panels item inside here. And the first thing you'll see is you'll have like kind of a listing of pages. And this is the Page Manager submodule of CTools. And what it basically is basically a listing of all your panel pages that you've set up or that Panels kind of gives you out of the box. What this basically is it interprets the URL, and if it finds the URL pattern in here, for instance, home, then it will basically send you to this panel page. You can create custom panel pages, so these kind of this one-off idea where you give it the URL path and then start using the panels tools to actually create the page. The other option is that you can kind of override the Drupal system, like the node system. So instead of using the node template file, it would know that this is a node and actually redirect it through Page Manager and pass it the panel that you've created or the panel layout that you've created with the content. So Page Manager is basically just a way of organizing your panel pages. The nice thing about them is they're importable and exportable, so you can kind of move them around. If you have a panel set up that you use all the time, you can pull it out of one site and then import it into another site. Or if you're deploying in a different environment, you can pull down that panel and export it and import it into your new environment. Panels is a layout manager. So one of the greatest things about Panels is we can have these different layouts. So inside the Panels interface, we have this layout tab, which gives us a whole slew of options for picking a layout. Panels ships with a kind of a UI Panels builder, which is like this drag and drop interface where you can kind of create rows and divisions of rows and kind of on the fly create your own layout. I've actually opted to use a set of layouts that have shipped with the Panoply distribution, so I kind of hijacked those and put them into this project here, which I included into my theme files. So my theme knows where to look for those and then just includes them for my use in Panels right here. And if you don't want to write your own layouts, I recommend these. They're pretty good. They're responsive. So you can kind of get a whole plethora of layouts that are responsive without having to do a whole lot of work. So Panels allows you to kind of choose a layout or a different layout that you would want to use for this specific page. The next part of Panels is it allows you to customize the content that's actually on this page. So this is an example of my home page that I built for this demo site. Going through these cogs, I can come up here and add content. It gives me an interface which I can add some views. I can go grab an existing node and place it inside this region. I have some other views up here. There's some Drupal elements in here that I can use. So there's some page elements. It's like the site logo or the breadcrumb I can just place inside this region. And then again, I have the ability to add different contents to my different regions that you can see here. This region has a header and kind of two stacked regions, and then, or two side-by-side regions, and then there's a footer region that's empty right now on my home page. But you can kind of load in extra panels in each one of these, or pane content, I'm sorry. Let's say I want to put in who's online. And I want to maybe put that above this. I can save this panel. And we can take a look here at my home page. I have this slideshow. I have this who's online, currently no users online. My news, and then just some custom content over here. So it's a great way of kind of just managing all the content on that one page. The next thing I'd like to show you is Panels has this idea called context. And basically all context is it allows you to build or hard code or build a relationship to Drupal objects. These objects can be nodes, taxonomy, users, basically any entity within Drupal. You can basically go grab that information and allow and actually use that information within your panel page. I have an example of this on my home page. So under my panel, there's this context tab, and I've created, actually, I'll show you this in a minute. I've created a context called user, and that user happens to be the logged in user. And this gives me a summary of what objects I can actually, or what tokens I can actually use from that object. So this user object has several things. It has the user name, which could be useful, the user ID. You can see it'll just give you a list of all the tokens or all the items that you can use kind of as tokens inside your panel page. And an example of this would be on my page title. I am using the username as a token. So on my home page here, or on my logged in user homepage, I have welcome back admin, the username. The next thing I want to talk about is panel variants. Panel variants basically allow you to have different versions of a panel based upon a selection rule. So if we go back into our homepage panel example, I have created two versions of a panel. They're basically identical. They give you the same set of options. Except for I have a selection rule set on this editors panel that looks to see if the user role basically is anonymous, and if they are, if they're not anonymous, so they're an authenticated user to my Drupal website. And if they are, it's actually serving up a version of the homepage for them. It has a different layout. It's using this sidebar layout with the main content area, and it actually has different content on the page. So I've actually enabled Workbench. So I'm pulling in some Workbench views. With the idea being anonymous users would come and their homepage experience would be the slideshow image, this recent news, maybe some custom content over here. But your users who log in and need to work with the site maybe have a dashboard as their homepage. So it's kind of a use case for having a panel variant. And just looking to see what selection rules should be running in order to serve this panel back. Okay. The next thing I wanted to talk about is Panels has a way of working with views in a very interesting way. Like I said, most of the time the views, you can build a block view and you can kind of pass the block view some information. Typically you're getting a node ID or term ID from the URL, and the block is just sitting there and it knows, it needs to grab this, and if it's the correct node ID, then it will filter results or do something. Panel pages actually have a way of doing this, and I feel like it's a better system of actually doing this. An example I have is I have a news feed, and all these pieces of content, news pieces of content, are actually tagged with an audience term, which is just vocabulary inside the Drupal taxonomy system. And what I'm actually doing here is I'm building a summary view by audience and then passing a term ID in the URL. You can see here, term ID 2. And the view over here is picking up that term ID and filtering on that. So it's kind of similar to a views page where you can have contextual filters running on it, and it looks in the URL and it can filter results. This is all done within the panels interface. So it's taking the argument from the URL, passing it into this news for faculty or this news view, and showing the results related to faculty or to staff, which is really cool. The next thing I wanted to show you is they're called visibility rules inside panels, and they actually allow you to evaluate something on the panel page itself and decide whether it needs to show up or not. And a good use case for this is I built this this kind of filtering alert, and what this is right here is it says it notifies your user that you're filtering by basically a term ID, faculty, and it gives them an option to remove this filter. And I can kind of show you how that works inside this panel page. Each panel pane has a configuration option to set a visibility rule on it. In this case, I'm just saying, look to see if there's an audience term ID here, or like an audience term. And if there is, then I want you to show up. And if there's not, then just hide yourself. So every time I click, so if I come to the page the first time, since there's no term ID present, the panel pane is not even showing up, the filtering alert. But as soon as the audience term ID is present on the page, it sees that and it actually shows this filtering message. So it's kind of a cool way to hide and show content based upon maybe a selection or something that's going on inside your website. Okay. So those are panel pages kind of in a nutshell. There's a lot of configuration. It's not overwhelming. The panels interface is actually reused across kind of the suite of tools. The next component I wanted to show you was kind of the views side of this and how views is working with with panels in order to create like a better user experience for maybe content creators or people who are not site builders. And one way it does that is it creates a new display type for views called content panes. And what this actually allows you to do is configure the view to take arguments to allow different configuration when you're placing the actual view that will make things a lot easier. So maybe somebody not so technical could come in and kind of tweak things and change things. An example of this would be my recent news feed. This is, again, this content pane view. And under this display type, you get this pane settings option. And one of the options down here is allowed settings. And you can kind of turn on and turn off things that you want your end users or your content people to be able to control. An example would be number of items per page, or to be able to override the title of this actual view. And I can show you in panels how that actually looks. So now that I've had that content pane view set up, when I place this view, I'll get these settings options. And inside here, I can basically decide I want one item to show, and actually I only want the title titles to show. I don't need the actual body teasers to show. We can save that. And then those options should now be reflected on that panel page for that view. You can see here we have the one item, and then the description teaser has gone away because that's how we've configured that. So it gives you a kind of a nice, easy, flexible way to provide to your kind of content people a way of kind of setting up their own views. Otherwise, you'd have to maybe go in and create a new view, or you'd have to give them access to views, which may not be a great idea. So that's views, content panes. There's actually a whole lot more to those, but I kind of just wanted to give you a short demo of the views, content panes in a nutshell, kind of how those work and why those might be valuable. Something else I wanted to show you, being a designer and a themer, it was kind of interesting coming into Drupal and designing for Drupal. Coming from a static background, you had a lot of control over markup, and you could kind of control the things that were going on as far as, you know, adding a new class or being able to control the markup in a very granular way, where Drupal kind of just spits out a lot of markup to you, and depending on what modules you're using, or if you're using, you know, block placements, or if you're using maybe another module that's controlling layout for you, you might be getting different markup, and it's kind of hard to, as a themer, to kind of go in and make design choices. So one thing I like about panels is it gives me very consistent markup. I can consistently know that each panel pane gets implemented a certain way. There's pane content, or there's a pane title, there's block content, there's then the content inside there, and I get this consistent markup across my site. Also, additionally, what this allows me to do is kind of build a class-based framework for implementing styles, and I can show you what I mean here. So inside each panel, we have the option of adding basic classes. Let me go here, CSS properties, and I can add classes in here. And what I've been tending to do now is basically write these style guides, and then implementing style based upon a class that we can put in here. If you wanted to go above and beyond, you can maybe create a select menu and actually have it all the different styles listed and actually be able to choose from one. But this is a pretty quick and easy way to implement some style. And like I said, maybe you can even open these up to your content editors. You give them a sheet that has all the style guides on there, and then you teach them or train them how to implement each of these classes. An example of this would be, this has a pane style set to blue. I could take this out and give it its default style, which should change this to green. Let's see here. I think I did this on my home page. Oh, I must have altered the layouts here too. But the idea being, you can create the style guide, and then easily implement those styles based upon classes that you can either train editors or train your developers to go in and add. So you don't have to do everything in CSS. You don't have to design everything and actually put everything into the CSS code. You kind of give them these style guides, and they can implement those on their own. Getting pretty close here. The last thing I wanted to go over was panelizer. Panelizer basically piggybacks off panels, and what it does is it allows you to create default templates for different entities inside of Drupal. It's a module. All you do is turn it on. Under configuration, it gives you a panelizer configuration screen. Let's see here, and you can see each node bundle. You can panelize taxonomy terms you can panelize, users you can panelize. And what this does is allow you to create a default panel for each one of these items. So you can see here my articles are panelized. I'm providing a default panel for that. You can see I have 2 panel options inside here. And once you get into the settings of this, this is basically just like panels again. So you have context, you can add context into here. You can change your layout, and this again is the default panel. You can change the content that's actually showing for the articles. I actually have 2 choices in here, and I'll show you what this does. So I have 2 options for a panel. What this allows me to do is when articles are created, I can have the content editors choose which panel they want to use. In this case, I have a default panel, which kind of just straight down the page lays this out in a column. And then I provided them another option that they can choose from. This one has recent news in the sidebar. So again, something to maybe make your content editors have different options. A lot of times people are wanting to kind of design the page, change the page. They don't always want to stick with the same node template that you've created for them. Sometimes they want maybe an advertisement or to do something different on the page, to maybe create some variation on their website. And this is a great way of actually introducing that, or allowing them to kind of have some options without having to have coding background or give them access to blocks or access to template files. Getting pretty close here. The last thing I wanted to show you was the panels in place editor. This is an excellent tool. I feel like we don't get a lot of really fancy UI things inside of Drupal, but this is kind of one of them. So panels ships also with a submodule called panels IPE, and that's short for in-place editor. You can basically turn it on and set a permission for what user roles can use the IPE, and then inside panels, this is an article, but inside the settings here, you just basically say that this panel is allowed to use the in-place editor, and I'm setting that right here, in-place editor. What that does is provide a toolbar here at the bottom, and you can change the content on the page, or you can change the layout. The layout screen is very similar to the panel screen, so you just pick what layout you'd like to use. You can set the content. It's kind of a drag and drop interface. So I don't have some of the other content boxes filled, but you get the idea. The additional thing is you can actually add content this way too. So it kind of knows the regions that you have available based upon the layout that you've chosen. And it gives you the normal kind of panels interface to include new content in this page. So maybe we add the slideshow here. And there's a filter going on here for some reason. I don't know if this is working or not. Okay, here we go. It's just a little buggy. But again, a very kind of intuitive tool, drag and drop, allows the content people to kind of change the page one-off. And again, this isn't affecting any of the other articles that I've created. All the other articles are actually using their default style. I've just changed the appearance of that one article. So it really gives you the ability to kind of customize those pages. And I hear that more often than not. People want power over the page. They want to be able to alter it. They want to be able to change it. And the panel suite of tools actually gives you the ability to keep that organized, to kind of have fine-grained granular control. So maybe a good example would be content authors maybe have a panel choice, so they can choose between some default panels that you've created. Maybe web liaisons or web administrators would have the ability to kind of customize a page using IP, the in-place editor. And then developers can use, panelizers or node templates or whatever other tool that they have at their disposal to customize the page or to customize Drupal. The other nice thing is it kind of gets you away from this block interface, so I wanted to show you this too. This is my blocks interface, pretty clean. I have 2 blocks in here. I'm rendering my main content, variable inside main content, and I have this custom block inside the footer. And so now the blocks page is kind of useful now. So anything that you put in the blocks page is just going to pretty much show up everywhere. It's kind of like, I kind of think about it as my page TPL. Anything that I put in here, they're going to show up everywhere. I know they're going to show up everywhere. And I don't have to click into that block and kind of figure out what's going on. Where is this block showing up? I just know that that's kind of my global page stuff right there. So that's kind of panels in a nutshell. We have adopted panels, like a full panels implementation for ITS, and it's been great. Content authors really like it. All the people that we work with think the IP is great to use. They love the control and the ability to kind of change their website. And it's nice for developers and designers because the designers can kind of create these style guides. Developers can kind of implement those styles, so it's not all on a theme implementer to actually style the entire website. You've built some classes that you can use and kind of style as you go along. And it's been really good for us. Does anybody have any questions? Yes. Yeah. You mean for when I'm actually placing that? So, yes, that's a good question. Panels actually has different ways of implementing the content. There's actually a way to implement just another node on the site, which is actually really useful. I don't know if anybody's ever ran into the problem where you have one piece of content and you want to link it in the menu system 2 different places. Drupal kind of doesn't play with that very well because that content actually lives in one place, and if you just link it into the menu item and you're using things like breadcrumbs or active trails, it doesn't know how to handle that. So one way of dealing with that is basically creating a new page, like a new panelized page or a new panel page itself, and going up to add content and just adding an existing node. So this is just an existing piece of content already on your site. And you can search for that node. I don't know if I'll have anything come up. Sure. You can tell what rendering it should use. In this case, you got to be careful if everything's panelized. It will pull in 2 versions, and you have IPE available. It will probably pull in 2 versions of the in-place editor, but we'll say full content here. And this was this page. And you can see, yes, so it's pulled in that article inside here. And that's what I mean about 2 IPEs. Since the IPE was available on the other node, you're actually seeing 2 versions of the IPE here. You could always go and create a custom view mode that would not have the IPE available and actually offer that back as something to use for placing node content. But yes, there's actually a lot of different types of content you can create. Views is probably the most popular. So you can create basically any view that you create, you can implement using the content management system for panels. Okay. Well, thank you very much.